who, because of the label, we don't give tasks to people which are assumed to be responsible and have independent behavior, or we give implicit tasks well below their competencies. Let's say for children, because we think that these are children, you don't give them responsibilities, and then suddenly they behave based on the label you give them. You say you're not able to do this, and this creates some sort of frustration that you can see also here. And these are the cases of stereotyping. All right, and I will have a short break here, and we'll continue in the next slide after this. For homework, please do the reading that is already online. Thank you. Hello again. Today we'll be looking at some quite more, let's say, intensive or negative cases of stereotyping and even cultural intolerance, and it's related to the issue of chauvinism. What is chauvinism? Chauvinism is a word that was generated long ago from a soldier of Napoleon. Let me just go back to the slide where I explained this briefly, and then we'll come back to them. One of the definitions of encyclopedia definitions about chauvinism was extreme and unreasoned partisanship on behalf of a group to which one belongs, especially when the partisanship includes malice and hatred towards a rival. The term is derived from from a soldier named Nicolas Chauvin, who fought under Napoleon Bonaparte, and he has this fanatical zeal for his emperor. And because of this being as evident and as strong, it later on became a serious issue, and people related this behavior to Nicolas Chauvin, and it was generally later on called chauvinism. Here are a few definitions of chauvinism. It would be generally a judgment that the chauvinist is right or wrong in his opinion was not implied, only that chauvinist individuals or ethnic groups are blind in their reasoning, ignoring any facts in decision making. So they are really sure that this is the right behavior and everything behind it is really ignored. However, in modern times, it is often used as pejoratively to imply that the chauvinist is both unreasoning and wrong. And you have probably seen many of these cases. Unfortunately, we see this on TV with politicians as well, every once in a while. Okay, here are this general information. In the following slides, we'll be looking at different types of chauvinism, and they are changing from one to another. The lighter one will be present at the beginning, and then the following one, the more we move towards the end, they'll become stronger and stronger. And we need to think of this as one sort of presentation that tells us what more or less not to do or how to identify this particular chauvinist behavior in order for them to be stopped in our classes or generally in our everyday life. The first category is ignorance. This is when there are certain attitudes or actions that are caused by not knowing things or by ignorance, and the person does not know the outgroup and is acting limited or biased data pertaining to the individual's outgroup. This would be people who kind of are not fully aware of which the other group is, and because of not having this information, they just decide to completely ignore or be quite, let's say, prejudicial towards them. They have pretty negative attitude towards them. The second type is a negative trait. This would be when a chauvinist person imputes traits considered obnoxious by his or her group as characteristics of all members or an outgroup. A stereotype exists for many ethnic groups, for example, the tight coat, the greedy Jew, the sneaky Mexican, the Latin lover, and so on. This would be negative trait. This would be treatments that are in the air there, that could be in media and so on, that makes you create a certain stereotype for a certain or particular outgroup. Let's say, you probably have seen in many movies something, or some characters in movies, maybe particularly in Western movies, in which the Mexicans are treated as sneaky, or you have in late 80s Latins as lovers, and you still actually have this Latin lover image used in media today as well. You have Antonio Banderas and all these Latin cultural representative who are treated as romantic and so on, and these are related to the traits, the negative traits or stereotypes that we would have in everyday life. Next issue would be xenophobia. Okay, this comes from the Greek word xenos, which is the strange or the person of the outgroup, and chauvinist attitudes towards xenophobia are actions that are rooted or that have their origin in dislike of a stranger or a discomfort with a person or the outgroup. And today these are very popular. Let's say if how people behave towards gay people, it would be homophobia, discomfort to unconventional gender preferences, and so on. So the hatred of the other, xenophobia. Next slide. This will be related to unpleasant experience. You probably have had some sort of unpleasant experience as a child with your neighbor who might have been from different ethnic groups and so on, and because of that, then everything goes on, and you hate these other groups just because of that one particular or few particular cases. Here's the definition. The chauvinist person has had unpleasant experiences with members of the outgroup and generalizes the unpleasant experience as characteristics of the whole group. Example, an Anglo boy is beaten up in a fight with a Mexican American boy. The Anglo boy then dislikes all Mexican American boys because they are all mean. Because of this unpleasant experience, it turns out that all Mexicans are mean. This is a typical case of unpleasant experience in xenophobia. In chauvinism, folkloric wisdom. This is related to certain role of people based on wisdom they've had earlier. I will just briefly read the definition because this bestly describes the issue. Chauvinist attitudes and actions are caused by conformity to traditional norms and roles learned through socialization, a theory of lowered life expectations. Folkloric wisdom, which is a manifestation of cultural degradation. This, in which describes learned norms and roles that impute low caste status to a person. For example, lower class white youngers may conform to the role of being poor. Why? Because from their perspectives, everyone they know has always been poor, and therefore we will always be poor. So these are some wisdoms that come from earlier, and they move on with you later on as well. Next case, and this is probably one of the strongest cases of chauvinism, is pathological personality. This places, as it says, an extremely chauvinist person into a category in which they have a chronic personality disorder. So this is not about an experience, this is somebody who has disorders, okay? According to this theory, persons with delusions of grandeur and paranoiac and sadistic tendencies may hold chauvinistic attitudes and practice violent crimes against members of an outgroup. This would be quite aggressive, right? Sadistic tendencies, chauvinist attitudes, and violent crimes. This is as strong as it gets. This type of person is a genuine hater. So they hate strongly and is often the leader of a hate group. And while very dangerous, it's not very common among the general laws of chauvinists. So luckily for us, unfortunately for us, there are pathological personalities. Luckily for us, they're not as big in groups. Often they are leaders in certain groups, if these are typical hate groups. And hate groups are generally these ultra-nationalist organizations. This would be, I don't know, sometimes unfortunately football fans who have a certain hatred towards another club or another ethnicity and so on. And sometimes these pathological personalities might end up leading this kind of organizations, but as I said, it's not very common, and also it's some sort of disorder, so you can't really do much to change this. It's just something that I guess professionals should deal with. Okay, scapegoat. This is very typical and probably one of the most used scenarios in politics today. In this case, the chauvinist person prejudices or are symbolic to the person's own fears, hopes, and aspirations. For example, the unsuccessful businessman blames the Jews in the community for his lack of success. Okay, this is what, let's say, Hitler or other leaders have used, a scapegoat chauvinism. Subconsciously, the chauvinist may fear that he is the cause of his failure, but rather than accept the blame, he transfers it to the outgroup. In other words, you would have sometimes scapegoat cases with people who did not manage into business and then they blame the government for them. But then you have typical cases within the government in which one political party cannot achieve a certain goal or a certain promise, and then they blame the opposition for that, or the opposition by losing the elections. Sometimes they blame the government for manipulating it. So they see this the outgroup as the reason for failure. Okay, although in some cases subconsciously they, as it says, may fear that they are the cause of his or their failure. However, obviously, it's much easier for them to send it to the outgroup. Economic competition. This is something that is related to modern days. In times of rapid changes, economic depression, or any other social or political crisis, when competition for land or basic resources is intensified, I guess you know, this is an everyday life story now, chauvinist attitudes, actions against an outgroup increase, thwarting the outgroup's economic advancement. And a social dynamic theory, the economic competition theory, describes the motive that undergirds the chauvinists that may prevail. In other words, if in your community there is a certain political or economical depression going on, or any failure that is going on, you are actually trying to, instead of making this progress that is expected, you blame this, or you create a chauvinist attitudes against an outgroup, a group from outside. Let's say we've had these cases somewhere in South Africa in which people, the local communities, have been beating up the comers from another regions around because they agreed to work for less in their land, and this is obviously for them a reason for having unknown, not very well developed economical situation. And there are cases like this everywhere, and companies who can't really succeed, they blame this on the conditions that the government puts in, or the unloyal competition. Although in the world we know that there is not much of a loyal competition anyway. Everybody wants to achieve their goals as short as possible without really worrying about what will the competition actually say about it. Okay, here is the short explanation about this case. The motive is to stymie the economical advancements of the outgroup so as to increase the economic advancement of the in-group. Okay, we have this case of Jim Crow laws enacted after the Civil War, for example, where it is intended to hold African Americans down by segregating and otherwise limiting their full participation in the Southern society. For example, poll taxes, literary tests for voting which in turn allowed whites to maintain the political and economical advantages they held before the Civil War. So, if you are more or less familiar with the Civil War developments, it was agreed that after that the African American will have a certain, let's say, equality within the system. And with what happened with the Jim Crow laws, is the intention to hold African Americans down, in the sense that they could not get impact from taxes, they couldn't any income from taxes, they could not get to vote and so on. So in order for them not to develop well, they would create these kind of scenarios for them to be in trouble. Okay, this is what we have so far, and of course we might give this credits to the book where this material I've seen it first, and this is a very nice material that you look at. It's by Ricardo L. Garcia, and the book is called Teaching in a Pluralistic Society, Concepts, Models and Strategies. It's a very useful book, and you should check it out, and probably you'll see more of this information there as well. Okay. Now what happens is the following. We are expected, you would think that the term chauvinism, which indicated something from Napoleon War, is still seen the same. No, today chauvinism has moved towards a different phase, and today we have, instead of passionate hatred of the other, we would have today the so-called nationalism, an absurdly exaggerated patriotism, and even militarism. So all they belong to this type of chauvinism. Today, most common components of chauvinism are racism, as you can see. This is still active, although we're in the 21st century. Sexism and ultra-nationalism. They all are part of it. Okay? Here we go. And the homework for this week would be an activity. This activity would be for you to choose 2 items in the list above. You remember we had this huge list about xenophobia, ignorance, negative trait, folkloric wisdom. What else do we have there? Economic competition, scapegoat. Choose 2 of these and try to think of an example that you have been related to or might have happened to you in your life earlier. As soon as you think of the example, try to put this as your case and write it down and submit it in Libri as soon as you can. The idea is for you to look at your own examples, and of course for me it's important when I look at the examples to understand if you have a clear idea of what was presented today. So 2 of these items, please write them down and upload it. Okay, here are the traits, the types of cases: ignorance, negative traits, xenophobia, folkloric wisdom, unpleasant experience, pathological personality, I hope you never had this case, scapegoat, and economic competition. Okay, this will be it for now. Thank you.